In the Bible, Jesus never directly calls himself God. Not even once.
Yes, you're actually right, if by that you mean that Jesus never used the phrase, I am God, to refer to himself. Hi, this is Lucas from Deflate, where we tackle the skeptics' objections to Christianity. And today, we're talking about whether Jesus did or didn't claim to be divine.
If Jesus claimed to be God, don't you think that would have been a pretty important part to include in the Gospels?
Yes, totally, which is why this part is included in the Gospels, as we're about to see.
Listen to this. In Numbers 23:19 and Hosea 11:9, the Bible says that God is not a man nor a son of man. But Jesus is said to be a man and a son of man all throughout the New Testament, like John 8:40, Acts 2:22, Timothy 2:5, Matthew 16:27.
Yes, Jesus is described as a man, while the Old Testament states that God is not a man. But the reason why you think that these two contradict each other is because you don't seem to understand what the incarnation is about. As God becomes a man in the person of Jesus, his divine essence doesn't cease to exist, nor does it get transformed into a human nature. No, the divine nature remains divine, but in Jesus of Nazareth, the second person of the Trinity takes on a human nature as well. Jesus is both fully man and fully God, but the human and the divine nature of Jesus are distinct. That's the reason why the Bible can both say that God is not a man and that Christ became a man.
In fact, Jesus often seems to outright deny that he's God, like in Luke 18:19, where Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." And John 14:28, where he says, "My Father is greater than I." So how can God be greater if they're the same?
Well, again, your question betrays a lack of understanding of what the Trinity is about. The Father, the Son, and the Spirit have one and the same divine nature, but they're not one and the same person. Instead, they are three distinct persons. That's why the person of God the Father can be greater than the person of Jesus, while both persons still have the same divine nature. Also consider that if I say that my boss is greater than I'm not implying that I'm any less human than he is. In the same way, Jesus saying that the Father is greater isn't implying that Jesus is any less divine than the Father. On top of that, note that just a couple of verses earlier, Jesus says that I am in my Father. And a couple of verses later, he says that I and the Father are one, in response to which the Jews want to stone him. Why? It is not for a good work that we're going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, being a man, make yourself God. So really, your case that Jesus denied to be God doesn't just get debunked by what Jesus said, but also by how his opponents reacted to it. To say that Luke 18:19 is an outright denial of Jesus' divinity is to completely miss the point. Jesus simply challenges the rich young ruler about what it means for him to address Jesus as a good teacher. And by the way, Jesus does describe himself in John's Gospel as the good shepherd, and so he takes on himself the goodness which he ascribes to God. Not only that, but he also takes on himself the title of the shepherd, which is how Yahweh was described in the Old Testament.
The historian Bart Ehrman, who was once an evangelical Christian, said, during his lifetime, Jesus himself didn't call himself God and didn't consider himself God, and none of his disciples had any inkling at all that he was God.
Well, yes, again, if by calling himself God you mean that Jesus never said, I am God, I agree with you. But we've already seen that this really isn't the point. Further note that Jesus is worshipped at several occasions in the Gospels without him objecting to it, which clearly implies that he considered himself to be God. For example, after he calms the storm in Matthew 14, we read that those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I guess Ehrman missed that when he said that none of Jesus' disciples had any inkling at all that Jesus was God.
If Jesus was explicitly God, it would have been said everywhere in the Bible, but it's not said anywhere. Not even once.
Well, you either haven't read the Bible or you missed the memo when doing so. This TikToker over here thinks that science has explained away God, which is only slightly more off than our friend's claim here that Jesus didn't think he was divine. Check it out. Thank you guys for watching and see you in the next one.